Okay, so maybe we can start. Tonight I have been asked, somebody asked me to ask about a particular topic, and they asked whether I can talk about the Buddha's advice to lay Buddhists. What kind of advice the Buddha would give to lay people. This question came from one of the members of the Buddhist Society who lives in India. And this is one of the kind of things I like about this Buddhist Society, is that we are so kind of everywhere. It's really nice. And you get a question from India, which is the homeland of Buddhism, right? And by the way, Venerable Nibbutto here is also from India originally, which I think is really nice. It kind of ties the Buddhist world together in a very beautiful way. So he asked me to talk about the Buddha's advice to lay people. And of course, I'm very happy to talk about that. I love to talk about the word of the Buddha, because I think the word of the Buddha is so profound, it is so well spoken, it is in fact so simple, right? Sometimes people say, oh, I can't understand the sutras, they are too kind of profound or whatever. I prefer to listen to talks and, read the books of Ajahn so-and-so, Ayya so-and-so, Master so-and-so, Sayadaw so-and-so, and all these kind of things. But for me, the word of the Buddha is by far the most clear, the most consistent, the most coherent, the most easy to understand of any contemporary or the teacher. And that's why I find it so, that's one of the reasons, many other reasons as well, why I find it so inspiring to actually have a look at the word of the Buddha. So what is the Buddha's advice to lay Buddhists? And of course the first thing that we have to talk about is there really any distinction between what the Buddha talks about to lay people and what he talks to monastics? And if there is a distinction, what is that distinction in particular? And of course the reality is that the Buddha's teaching, which is an understanding of reality, the way things really are, how to find happiness in the world, how to overcome suffering, etc. The basic principles of that are exactly the same, whether you are a lay Buddhist or a monastic, right? Doesn't really make that much difference, because the world functions in a certain way. And if you are a person, you have a mind, you have your problems, you have your happinesses, then of course you have to operate in the same way, regardless whether you are a lay person or a monastic. So essentially it is the same teaching. But of course there is a distinction, and the reason that there is a distinction is because there is often a difference in commitment, right? Hopefully most monastics are more committed, the average monastic hopefully more committed than the average lay Buddhist. But that is really the only distinction. And because of that distinction, what you find in the suttas, in the word of the Buddha, is that the word of the Buddha tends to be, to lay people, a bit more on basic subjects, right? Not kind of the highest kind of insights very often, or the deepest kind of meditations, but often a bit more basic subjects. But occasionally you find that there is one, a certain layperson who has reached some very high meditation state or whatever, and then you actually find that even to lay people occasionally, you find that the most profound topics are actually taught. If there are someone who is very committed, someone who is about to die, someone who is ready to see something profound on the Buddhist path. So it's all there in both camps. It's just a matter of degree, right? So whether you talk to lay people or monastics, it's very, in a large sense, to a large extent, very much the same thing here. But of course, because sometimes lay people have kind of more lay people concerns, right? Sometimes the teachings, even in the suttas, are really kind of down to earth to some lay people. And one example of this, of a really down to earth teaching here, this is when King Pasenadi goes to visit the Buddha. King Pasenadi, he was a king of one of the largest kingdoms in India at the time, called the Kosalan kingdom, a very large kingdom in the north of India, perhaps roughly, it's very hard to say exactly how large it was, but maybe roughly the size of Thailand or something like that. So it's quite a large country, right? Especially at the time when they didn't have any cars or any planes to kind of hold it together. It is quite large for those times. So he was the king of this country, and he was a very staunch disciple of the Buddha, and he would regularly go to the Buddha to ask the Buddha various kinds of questions, right? And some of these questions are really sweet questions. That's why I want to talk about this, because he was kind of concerned sometimes with very worldly, ordinary things. And on one occasion, he comes to the Buddha and he's kind of huffing and puffing away. He's just had a meal and he's putting on weight, right? And then the Buddha gives him a teaching on how to lose weight. And this is actually in the sutta. This is one of the teachings the Buddha gave to one of the people. Well, it's so down to earth, right? It's just some kind of straight down the line for that many people wish they had that kind of teaching. And what I like about this is that one of the problems sometimes with Buddhism is that sometimes we tend to kind of elevate the Buddha in the wrong way. We regard the Buddha as some kind of somebody who is sort of beyond humanity and is outside ordinary understanding of what human beings are here. He's kind of outside of the he's kind of almost like a god in a sense, or he is the Dhamma principle, which is beyond human beings, all these kind of things. But the more you read the suttas, the more you understand that the Buddha has all these very human qualities, right? And this is so interesting. Not only does he have human qualities, but the way that he interacts with people is exactly the way that you would expect an ordinary person to interact with somebody else. This is how you lose weight, right? Oh, thank you, Master. It's a wonderful thing. You gave me this profound instruction on how to lose weight. I'm so happy about that. What a wonderful thing that is. So there's all these ordinary teachings that come into this, and it humanizes the Buddha. It shows us that the Buddha really is one of us. He's a human being. He's not something entirely different. And this is important. I mean, of course, it is crucial to respect the Buddha. It's crucial to understand that he had understood something that the vast majority of people do not understand. Especially, he understands the distinction between true happiness and true suffering in life. This is what the Buddha understands. It is the thing that everybody is looking for. So he has really found the answer to the meaning of life. And this is what I find is just so powerful about the Buddha. Right? So this is on the one hand, this is what makes him so powerful. And on the other hand, he is a human being, just like the rest of us. You read in the suttas, it talks about his defilements that he had before his awakening, right? He talks about ill will, he talks about sensual desire, he talks about having wrong view, right? Looking at the world in the wrong way. He talks about all of these ordinary things. He talks about his body getting old and out of shape and falling apart. He talks about having backaches, right, when he gets old, and all of these kind of things. So these are the things that humanizes the Buddha, and it shows us that the Buddha basically is just a human being, but a human being who took the human potential to its highest, or took the human state to its highest potential. That's what it is. So when we respect the Buddha, it's important to respect him in a sense in the right way. Yes, we can put the Buddha on a bit of a pedestal, like this pedestal behind here, and that's fine. We should do that because he really is the supreme teacher of what everybody wants to know. But we should not put him on the wrong kind of pedestal. So what was that teaching that the Buddha gave on how to overcome weight, or kind of lose weight? Are you interested in that? Is that a good, interesting teaching? Is that what you came here for tonight? Probably not. So what is the teaching that he gave? And what he said was that the way to do this is very, very simple, right? Very basic teaching. You are ever mindful, and when you're mindful, you realize moderation in food. And when you have moderation in what you eat and in your food, then the consequence of that is that you have less illnesses, and you live a long time. And of course, because he was teaching a king, he taught this verse to the king's attendant, right? Okay, attendant, you learn this, and every time the king has a meal, you say this to him, right? You say these words to him. It's easy to be mindful, right, when somebody tells you exactly what you have to do. So this is kind of the advantage of being a king. You have a special man just to tell you how to kind of lose weight. But it's interesting because it's so simple. It's just about being mindful and remembering some very basic instructions. And one of the instructions there, which I find interesting also, is this idea that if you eat in moderation, you live long, right? You have a long life. This is one of those things that you will see today as well. This is one of the things that is fairly well known, I think, even in the present day, that moderation in eating tends to lead to good health and a long life. But it goes back to the time of the Buddha, goes back 2,500 years. So this is the first thing, right? So I'm just starting off with some of the really basic things. What is interesting about the Buddha's relationship to this King Pasenadi is that they were very close together, and King Pasenadi would go to the Buddha on a very regular basis and ask for advice, right? And one to tell this understanding is, go ahead and King Pasenadi world who treat bad actions, they treat themselves as if they are their own enemies. But those people in the world who treat other people with good actions by body, speech and mind, they treat themselves as if they are their friends, as if they love themselves. Right? And so the point, what he's saying here, and this is kind of an interesting point because it's almost the reverse psychology of how we normally think about things. It is not just the fact that when you treat other people well, you kind of love those other people. When you treat other people well, you love yourself. You are your own friend. In the same way, if you treat other people badly by body, speech and mind, it is not only as if you treat those other people as enemies, you are treating yourself as your enemy. So it's kind of entirely reverse psychology of how we normally think about this. And of course, it is very obvious from a Buddhist point of view, because if you treat somebody else bad, who is the person who will in the long run have most negative effect from that bad action towards others? It is you, right? You will regret doing those things, you will feel bad about it afterwards, and this may go on for a long time into the future. So every time you do something bad towards somebody else, you are treating yourself as if you are your own enemy. And in the same way, when you do something kind to other people, when you treat other people well, you are the one who reap the most benefit from that. Because in the future, you will feel happy and content from your good actions, and you are treating yourself as your friend. So remember that, right? It's a very powerful, very simple teaching here, that when we treat others badly here, it is not them that we hurt the most. The person we hurt the most is ourselves. Do you really want to hurt yourself? Do you want to be your own friend? Do you want to love yourself? Do you want to have a good relationship to yourself? Or do you want to live to your own detriment and drag yourself down and actually be like your own enemy here? So when you think about that, you're turning this thing around a little bit, and it actually makes a kind of different impression of the mind. Be kind, because being kind means being kind to yourself, not only to the other person. So I like these kind of little things, that kind of reverse psychology in a sense, that turn things up, turn things around. And there is another teaching by the Buddha, also to lay people. This was not to King Pasenadi, on a similar, which is nice and complementary to this one here. And that is the idea of how, as a layperson, one should use one's wealth, right? Whatever money, whatever assets we have, how should we use that as a layperson? What is the right way? As a monastic, okay, we also use our assets in a similar kind of way, but it's a bit more limited, right? I haven't got that many assets. I've got this robe here, and this sitting cloth, and a few things like that, but not much. So how do we use our assets as lay people? And the answer that the Buddha says, and again, it's I think a very nice answer. It's very different from how we are normally taught to think about this, perhaps especially in the Western culture. And the Buddha says, the first thing you do with your assets, you have probably worked hard, most people work hard in this life, right? And you build up a certain amount of money and assets in your own life. And then, how do we spend that? And the Buddha said the first person that you should make happy and who you should look after when you have enough assets is yourself, right? That is the first person. So when you have and it's a foolish person who doesn't actually spend a certain amount of wealth on themselves to make themselves happy. And then, once you have made yourself happy and pleased, then of course you should make your parents happy and pleased, your wife or husband and children, your other family members, and of course also those people who are, in a sense, maybe employees in your families, right? In those days they had kind of extended families with lots of employees in the family, people who were, servants and workers and all these kind of things. So that is how you use your money. First yourself, and then going down, gradually down, to those people who are closest to you. And then the last place where you use money according to the ancient suttas is for charity. So once everybody has kind of, everybody is reasonably happy, you also use a certain amount to charity here. In those days, that usually meant giving to ascetics, people who lived the ascetic life. That's usually what it meant in those days. So it's beautiful because it is, when you think about it, it's actually quite logical. Right? We are closest to ourselves. If we really love ourselves and look after ourselves, of course, we should look after ourselves also in a way we use our own money and use our own wealth. Then those people who we also love and who are close to us, our family members or whatever, we look after them. And in this way, you go down the line to all the people who mean something in your life. And eventually, you look after other people as well. It's a beautiful way of thinking about life. But of course, it needs to be a balance between these things, right? You don't use everything on yourself. You find this nice balance in how these things are done. And in this way, you live well in this sense. So that is just some basic things on how to create happiness for yourself, etc., and how to think about ideas such as morality and things. Now there's another time, I'm going to come back to this King Pasenadi again, because there is a whole chapter of suttas, of discourses, where King Pasenadi is talking to the Buddha. It's about 25 little discourses, and if you ever want to check it out, it's in a collection called the Connected Discourses of the Buddha, and you find all these conversations between the Buddha and King Pasenadi. So on one other occasion, he goes to the Buddha and he asks the Buddha, what is, Master, what is the one thing that leads to happiness, both in this life and in future lives? Right? If there's one thing you want to single out as the most important thing that leads to both happiness in this life and in future lives, what is that? He asked the Buddha. And the Buddha replies that one thing is appamada, right? Okay, I promise to translate this, otherwise you're going to might be in trouble. Appamada is the Pali word, and that Pali word means something like heedfulness, right? To be heedful means to be careful. It means to be circumspect. It means to consider things, think about things, reflect on them before you actually act. That's what heedfulness means, right? So the one thing which is at the base of everything else, says the Buddha, is this idea of heedfulness, appamada in Pali here. And if you know the suttas fairly broadly, you will know that this is actually in many places, this is said to be the foundation for the entire spiritual practice, entire spiritual life. Because unless you consider things carefully here, unless you stand back and think about things properly, unless you are a little bit reflective about your own life, right? You're not going to go anywhere because you don't really reflect, you don't consider what is really important in life, what truly makes people happy, what is really going to be beneficial. You have to have that reflection in life, otherwise you're not going to go anywhere at all. So it's fairly obvious that that is the case once you realize that. So what are, in particular, the things that we are supposed to be appamada, or heedful about? And this then comes to the other thing, which is, I think, a very important teaching to the Buddha, to lay people, to lay Buddhists generally. And there's two things that the Buddha emphasizes usually in the suttas to the lay people. And one is generosity, and the other one is morality. Right? And sometimes when you say to people, this is what the Buddha emphasizes for the lay people, and people say, we feel a bit shortchanged. We want to hear the higher teachings as well. We don't want to hear about generosity and morality and all these things. But I think this is really underestimating the power of these these more basic factors on the path. The power in terms of their scope, their width, in terms of their profundity, right? Once you understand the scope and the width of things like generosity and morality, then you start to practice these in a slightly different way from what you're used to. So these things are actually very important. They're not kind of basic things that you kind of get out of the way and then you move on to the higher things in Buddhism. These are actually fundamental things. So take something like generosity, right? What does it actually mean? And first thing I should say is that these things are not just for lay people. It's not as if, the the lay people are kind of really generous and the monastic community is really selfish or anything like that. That's not really the idea. These things are universal qualities that everybody needs to practice, whether you are a monastic or a lay person. But the idea with these things, the idea with generosity is that it is something that opens your heart up, it opens you out to a sense of kindness, a sense of metta, of loving kindness, of compassion to all beings around you, right? If you are generous, it takes a certain perception of others, it takes a certain willingness to share what you have with other people, and that kind of opens you up in a very beautiful way. And I'm sure sometimes many of you will have had that feeling in life where you feel almost like this generosity coming out of you, and you want to share with all people around you. And if you know that feeling, you know that it is a very beautiful feeling. It is a feeling where the mind is very pure, the mind is very beautiful. There's no hostility there, there's no selfishness. It's a very expansive kind of mind state, right? When you're selfish, you're kind of narrow down inside of yourself. And there's a lack kind of in this beautiful, expansive mind state, isn't there? And then when the mind expands and it takes in all other people, then you feel a powerful inspiration, a powerful sense of something very beautiful happening inside of you. And you know, if you are sensitive to that, you know that this is precisely a spiritual state of mind. This is the kind of state of mind you know that anyone who practices the spiritual path would be recommending, because you can feel there's something both powerful and beautiful about that. And of course the point here is that if you want to go further on the path, if you want to be more serious about meditation practice, you want to come and do a meditation retreat at our wonderful Jhana Grove Meditation Center or whatever it is, then you recognize that this kind of quality is really the foundation for meditation practice. If you haven't got this open-hearted, open-handed feeling whereby you want to really be generous with the whole world, if you have more like a stingy feeling inside, it's not going to work. But the more open-hearted you are, the more open-handed you are, the more willing you are to share and give to all beings around you, that is the kind of mind state that makes meditation possible. In fact, the Buddha says that. He says very specifically that if you have this state of mind, that is when also you have access to the really deep states of samadhi, the really deep states of meditation practice that this path promises you. Right? So generosity is about developing this kind of mental attitude, this way of looking at the world. And it doesn't have to do so much with kind of, if you like, the size or the amount or that kind of thing, or how much you give and these kind of things. What it has to do with is a general state of mind that you carry with you in ordinary life. The state of mind where you always have this feeling of kind of being willing to share and give something to others or the world around you. It's a general state of mind. So it's more about how often we are generous, right, than about how much necessarily we do. This is, I think, very important aspect of this thing we call generosity here. So that is the generosity side, and this is a very important teaching that the Buddha always teaches to lay people, and he also teaches it to monastics as well here. So to the extent that we have the opportunity to be generous, we try to live exactly like that, because you realize after a while that this is absolutely required for the path to really mature and to get anywhere here. So that is the generosity side. So then we have the morality side, right? And very often when we talk about morality or sila in Buddhism, we often talk about the 5 precepts, right? And of course the 5 precepts are a very important foundation for the Buddhist practice. If you got those, you already have a nice foundation there. And one of the great things I think about this Buddhist society is that there are so many people here who actually practice these 5 precepts. I think we have over 1,000 members, right, who practice the 5 precepts in this Buddhist society here. And that is just so inspiring, right? It is such a wonderful thing here. There's a story which Ajahn Brahmali always tells, well, not always, but he tells it sometimes. I can't remember when he told it last, but there's a story from Thailand, and this is when he was in his monastery, Ajahn Chah was Ajahn Brahm's teacher, as I'm sure all of you will realize by now. Ajahn Chah was one of the most famous monks in Thailand in the 20th century. I think at his funeral, they had something like 500,000 people show up, right, at his funeral. Absolutely massive. I hate to kind of think about Ajahn Brahm's funeral. It's probably going to be something similar. 500,000 people coming, right? We see. Can we organize that, Drew, out here? Is that first? Okay, don't tell the council. Okay, we've been in serious trouble. Anyway, that's for the future. Hopefully, that's still a long way away, because it would be a rather significant loss to say that to if that happened. But anyway, this was Ajahn Chah's monastery, right? He was very, very famous monk. And on the Uposatha days, the days of the full moon and the new moon, people would always come to the monastery here. And of course, on the Vesak day, the day when we celebrate the Buddha's birth and passing away and enlightenment, the Vesak day, the crowds were often very large. They would all come to see Ajahn Chah from all the neighboring districts and that sort of thing here. So on one of these days, when the monastery was absolutely packed, I don't know how many people were there, maybe 1,000 people or something here, Ajahn Chah used the opportunity and he said, "How many of you keep the 5 precepts," right? And then he looked around, 1,000 people, right? I mean, this crowd here is small today compared to 1,000 people. So 1,000 people out there. And he looks out and he sees 2 people put up their hand, keeping the 5 precepts. And the rest are kind of looking a bit sheepishly, looking down on the ground, right? Feeling a bit bad about this. 2 people, right? This is in the heart of Thailand, one of the best monasteries in Thailand. And yet that was the kind of standard that often lay people would have at that time. And now here we have the Buddha Society where over 1,000 people keep the 5 precepts. It's a wonderful thing, and sometimes people don't appreciate enough how wonderful and how marvelous it is that we have so many people who are so committed to the Dhamma, so committed to practicing in the right way. And not only here in Perth, but overseas as well, people who are part of this. We have if you may not be aware of this, but we have an online facility for the BSWA website where you can take the precepts online, right? Because you live somewhere far away, like in Africa or in South America or in North America for that matter, or in Europe or whatever it is, and you have no temple around you, so you come to the BSWA. We come to the rescue. Here is where you can take the 5 precepts. Beautiful, right? So you come here online, do it kind of in cyberspace, take the 5 precepts. It's all the same thing anyway. What a wonderful thing that is. But, and this is kind of the point here, it is not really enough, right? It's wonderful, but it's not wonderful enough. You can be even more wonderful than just keeping the 5 precepts. And I would recommend you to be even more wonderful. First of all, I would say to those of you who are not keeping the 5 precepts, I'm not going to ask you to put up your hands or anything like that. Oh, that would be pretty embarrassing, wouldn't it? But I would really recommend you to take this as the foundation stone for your Buddhist life, because it is really incredibly important. If you want to be happy, if you want to have some success in your meditation practice, if you want to be a kind of beacon, right, for other people around you, how to live life well, wow, this is really what you should be doing here. But ideally, if you are really serious about the Buddhist practice, it's not really enough, right? That's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? You probably feel really, that's really, but the point is that even the 5 precepts, after a while, they become like second nature. You keep the 5 precepts, you do it every day, you know exactly what you're doing, it kind of comes from your heart anyway, you know that this is the right thing to do. And because it is second nature, you don't invest a lot of intention into that anymore. You don't invest intention and your will, if you like, your volition into the idea of being kind and being caring and being compassionate and being good to the people around you. And because there isn't that intention there, it means that the amount of good karma you're making, it is still great, but it's not as good as it could be. And you start to realize the limitations of these 5 precepts. They are great as a foundation, but if you're really serious and if you really want to go further, you have to actually go beyond that. And of course, we know that the Buddha talks about things like right speech, right? And right speech is one of those areas that are very difficult. to speak in a way which unifies people, brings harmony in the community, speak in a way which is gentle rather than harsh, speak in a way which is meaningful rather than speaking things which are just idle chatter and all these kind of things. These are the things the Buddha talks about, and these are the areas where we all can kind of do something to improve, to lift our game a little bit further. Not to speak of the mind, right? Mental virtue is also an aspect of the Buddhist path. And all of these things, when you start to look at all of these things, the breadth and the scope of the Buddhist practice is so wide, and it's so much more than what most people normally think of as morality or ethics. And why is this so important? For those of you who are interested in meditation practice, interested in being mindful, interested in experiencing some of the joy that is available on the Buddhist path, the Buddha consistently says there is one thing which is the source, the foundation, the basis upon which all meditation works. And that source, foundation, and basis for meditation is sila. The Pali word sila means precisely morality, but morality in this very broad sense, right? You could call it character development, if you like, whereby you change your character to lift it up and to make it something more beautiful and something more wholesome in a sense. Your entire attitude to the world changes. You have more compassion, more understanding, more love for the people around you. It's not just external, it's in your heart. Your very heart is changing. This is what this is about. And people often, I think, make a mistake in the sense they think that, the reason why perhaps my meditation isn't going so well, why am I not making quicker progress than I am? These are the kind of standard questions people have. I want to make progress more quickly. Why am I stagnating? What's going on? And they often think, I'm not sitting enough hours, I want to sit for 8 hours a day, or maybe I'm using the wrong meditation object, right? Maybe should I use metta? Should I use, in other words, loving kindness meditation? Should it be breath meditation? Should it maybe be asubha meditation? I don't know, maybe I'm using the wrong meditation object. Or they think, I don't really know how to use the meditation, or I'm focusing on the breath in the wrong way, or whatever it is. But no, the Buddha never really talks about any of those things. These things are not the reason why the meditation isn't working. They may have a little bit to do with it, but the only thing that the Buddha consistently says in the suttas is the cause for good meditation practice is your sila, your purity, your character, who you are as a person. That is the thing that really matters. And now you can see when the Buddha tells the lay people to be moral, to live well, to be kind-hearted, all these kind of things, it's actually very profound. It is a sort of thing that enables you later on in life to come here, sit down, go to Jhana Grove and meditate and actually get the real results. But you have to take this idea of sila, or morality, to a very profound level. And then these things really start to make a big difference. You start to learn how to become less angry as a person. You start to learn how to look at people in such a way that anger doesn't arise anymore. You start to understand that other people, they are trapped in their own personalities. They are trapped because of their own past. They can't really be much different from the way they are. And then you can have compassion to them when they do stupid things, rather than being angry and upset in return. These very simple, basic aspects of Buddhist teachings that enables you to become a far better person as a consequence, right? If you look at people in the right way, how can you ever get angry? Right? They are trapped in the way they're doing things. When they do something bad towards somebody else, whether it is towards you or something else, it's not because they want to do something bad, it's because they are compelled by their own history to live out those actions. Got nothing to do with you, has everything to do with the other person. And when you change your attitude towards these kind of things in this way, something very profound changes inside of you. What changes is that you become a different person. Your character changes, and a goodness arises inside of you, which you have never seen perhaps before. Or maybe you have, but maybe a long, long, long time in the past, right? A past that you can't even recall. So this is the idea of Buddhist morality, and this is why I think the Buddha emphasized this, not only for lay people, but of course for monastics as well, because this is such an important foundation for everything in Buddhism. Without that, there is really no going forward. So remember that, right? And when you remember that, whoa, it gives such a wonderful and powerful boost. So, apamada, right? Being heedful is the foundation, the one thing that we all should do on this Buddhist path. Have to be heedful at the very base of the Buddhist path. From that heedfulness comes a morality and generosity, because we understand the power of these things. But how can we be heedful? This is the other interesting question, right? It's easy to say, be heedful, but sometimes we just forget. Sometimes we haven't got the mindfulness. Sometimes we just don't know what's happening around us. We're kind of walking around in the fog of life, thinking about things, and suddenly something comes in from left field, right, and bang, it hits you, and then you react to it because you don't actually have the mindfulness to do that. So how can we establish that heedfulness in our lives? How can we be careful and make these things work for us in the right way? That's pretty important, isn't it? It's really fundamental. And what the Buddha says is that, again, and this again is advice to lay people, right? It's advice to monastics as well, but it's also to lay people, that the way to do that, the way to remain heedful, is to make sure that we all have enough spiritual input in our lives. That we listen to spiritual teachings, that we listen to the monastic, you listen to the Buddha, you understand the word of the Buddha and all these kind of things. And if you have enough spiritual input, that will always remind you of what you have to do. It's so easy to forget, right? Is it easy enough to forget in the monastery, where you are surrounded by other people who are like-minded all the time, let alone how easy it is to forget in lay life because of all the business and all the stuff that goes on. I've been there. It was a long time ago now, but I have been there, and I know what it's like. I know what it's like even now sometimes. So because of that, we need that continuous spiritual input, that input which reminds us of what actually is important in life, reminds us of our priorities, how we should be living our life, etc. So, and the Buddha compares this, a very beautiful simile in the sutras that I think I spoke here a few weeks ago as well. And he compares this to rain falling on the mountaintop. Right? What happens when the rain falls on the mountaintop? If it keeps on falling and falling and falling and falling, then the rain forms into little streams. Right? Those little streams then merge and go into larger streams. Those larger streams then go into the little lakes. The little lakes overflow, go into the larger lakes. The larger lakes eventually overflow, go into the big rivers. The big rivers eventually become, big and large, and they go into the ocean. And then gradually they fill up the great ocean. So if it keeps on raining on that mountaintop, right? Keeps on raining and raining and raining, it eventually ends up filling up the great ocean itself. But the rain has to continue. It has to keep on raining. And when that rain keeps on going, then eventually it happens. In the same way, you have to continue to get that input in your life all the time. That reminder of what is important in life, on how to live. And when you keep on getting that reminder, it is as if it is raining on that mountaintop. And eventually the great ocean itself fills up. What does it mean that the great ocean fills up? Well, eventually what it means is that eventually, of course, the idea is to reach the Buddhist idea of awakening itself. So one day, if you keep on raining, right, and all you have to do is to listen to good teachings, listen to the real Dhamma, understand what the Buddha was on about, and as you do that, you inexorably moving towards awakening, whether you want to or not, right? There's no stopping you anymore. And if you don't want awakening, well, remember, awakening is the highest happiness, right? So it's really worthwhile. It's a really good place to go. So inexorably, no choice, moving towards awakening, just by allowing that rain to fall on the mountaintop continuously again and again and again. So that is the foundation, and that is how this whole thing kind of moves in that direction. Right? You can kind of see how these things kind of fit together very beautifully here. And when you understand that. And so there are really only some very few basic things that we need to remember in our life if we want to live well as Buddhists. And one is to remember to get spiritual input, on a regular basis. And the other thing which is very useful to keep in mind, just going back to the idea of morality I was talking about before, is just remember kindness, right? Remember input, remember spiritual input and kindness. If you can remember those two things in your life, wow, you're going to go a long, long, long way on the Buddhist path. So So these are some of the basic things that the Buddha talked about to lay people. There is one other thing which is very, I think, interesting in the suttas, and that is the Buddha talks about certain recollections, certain ways to think about the world, right? And he specifically said that lay people should also think about these things in the right way. So what are these recollections? And there's 5 standard recollections the Buddha talks about, and that we should remember that illness is part of life. Old age is part of life. He talks about everything that is dear and pleasing to me must depart from me one day. You cannot hold on to things in this world. Things eventually have to go. He talks about we are the heir of our karma. And lastly, he talks about the fact that we must die, right? Death is an aspect of life. And I think this is the idea of death here. All of these other aspects are kind of, in a sense, subsumed under this idea that we must die. But the recollection that life eventually must end in death, I think is one of those very important spiritual reflections that most people should do from time to time. Because why is it so important? Why does the Buddha say that lay people, everybody, should reflect on this? And of course the reason is because when you reflect, when you know that you're going to die, and you don't know exactly when it's going to be, right? Sometimes it happens before we would like it to happen. When we remember that, what it means is that we start to prioritize different in life. When we remember that we're going to die, remember that there is a bigger picture at stake. There is a larger thing going on. It is not just this narrow little existence that we have here. There's a much bigger picture that we have to look at. And this is explained in a very beautiful way elsewhere in the suttas. Actually, before I even go there, I will just there's another nice little simile about the kind of the nature of death that I remember when I started reading the word of the Buddha. It really struck me as very powerful. And this also is about a conversation between King Pasenadi and the Buddha. And King Pasenadi again comes to the Buddha, and King Pasenadi complains, all these ministers and all these kind of foolish people, I've had enough of all that stuff. And then the Buddha says to him, well, great king, he was called Maharaja, great king, is that what that word means? Well, great king, if a man came to you from the south and said, a mountain is coming this way, a mountain is walking this way, crushing all living beings in its path, what would you do? If another man is coming from the east, walking towards you, crushing all living beings in its path, what would you do? If a third mountain is coming from the north, a fourth mountain is coming from the west, each one of them crushing all living beings in the path, and you are in the middle, just waiting for the mountain to crush you, what would you do? And of course, the king answers, well, if that was the case, I would just kind of get on with my practice and do what is good and do what is wholesome. What else can you do when death is so inevitable? And of course, then the Buddha says, I inform you, I announce to you, death is coming right now, moving in on you, and before you know it, your life will be over. What will you do? Of course, what can you do except for living wisely and to do what is good and avoid what is bad? Right? And this is kind of, and I remember reading that, when I first read that, I thought this is really powerful simile for death in our life, how important it is and how central, when you think about it in the right way, how it changes your attitude about things. And one of the other similes that the Buddha is using to kind of drive home this point is a simile. He says that life is a bit like all the sensual, all the objects, all the things that we accumulate in life. Although those things are like borrowed goods. Everything in life is like borrowed goods. Right? If you borrow something from somebody else, you don't attach too much to it, because if you attach too much to that thing, then when you give it up again, it's going to be very painful for you. Right? So when you borrow somebody, okay, you're borrowing something for maybe a few days or a week or a month or whatever, maybe you're renting an apartment, you don't invest so much into that apartment because you know you're going to have to give it up very soon. But the Buddha says everything in life is like that. Everything in life is like borrowed goods. Why? Because eventually you're going to have to die. And when you die, you're going to have to give it all up again. All your possessions, everything you own in this world, all your friendships, all your relationships with your family members, whatever it is, right? A lot of your psychological belongings, things like your status in society, your education, your social position, whatever it is, that too has to go. And of course, finally, your own physical body has to go as well. All of that stuff is really just borrowed goods. It belongs to this world, does not belong to the next world. When you come to the boundary between this life and the next life, you're going to have to give it all up. And what are you left with? At that point, you're left with only one thing, and that is your mind. And if that mind has been developed in a good way to be made beautiful and shiny and powerful and happy, you bring that happiness into the future, right? And that is what it means then to basically get a good rebirth in a future life. It means that you're bringing with you a beautiful mind that you have created in this life, a beautiful character, and that then moves you forward in a positive way in a future life. Right? So it is all about investment. How are we going to invest our time? What is our investment strategy going to be like, right? How much are we going to invest in this narrow little slice of time, which is called this life? And how much are you going to invest instead in a much broader picture of things? The great expanse, right, of life, moving on from this life, moving on into the future, into a renewed existence, and possibly going on like that for a very long time. What are you going to invest in? Right? And this is what the idea of death tells you. If you remind yourself you're going to die, it reminds you where you should invest. It reminds you what is really important in life. It doesn't mean that you stop doing the ordinary things in life, but it means that how you deal with the ordinary things in life changes. Yes, you still work, you still do the things that you have to do with your family and friends, but you change the quality on how you do those things. You do it in a different way. You do it with more kindness, with more care, more compassion, to ensure that you build up all these positive qualities inside of you. And then you are, in a sense, investing in the right way. Right? So this is the idea of death contemplation. It is not bad at all if you use death contemplation in the right way. If you remind yourself you're going to die, what it leads to an enhancement of the quality of your life, more mindfulness, more ability to prioritize in the right way, right? And this is what death contemplation really is about at its most basic level. So it's a beautiful thing here. So when you do all of these things that I've been talking about now, right, or some of them, or whatever it is, you do some of these things anyway, then the Buddha also says, and this is one of the teachings he gave to Anathapindika, one of the most important lay disciples of the Buddha, who donated large monasteries and these kind of things to the Buddha and the Sangha at the time. He says to him that even you lay disciples, sometimes you should go away from the crowd, find a secluded place, and enjoy the bliss of seclusion in your own life. Right? What he's saying there is that you should not be satisfied with just being moral, not be satisfied with just living a life of generosity and kindness. Sometimes you should take time out and you should go to places like Jhana Grove. He doesn't actually mention Jhana Grove in the suttas, but he probably would have if he had known about it. So go to Jhana Grove, take time out and enjoy the meditation, enjoy the happiness that comes from living life well and living life in a good way. Because this is the fruit, right? One of the benefits of living life well. So please do that. And one of the beautiful things that you find out when you go on a meditation retreat, right, you find out a number of things. First of all, you find out that meditation sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes you're frustrated, sometimes you're not, all these kind of things, of course. But one of the things that you find out, if you go on regular retreats, say once a year or once every 6 months or whatever it is, you find out whether you are living your life as a Buddhist or as a spiritual person or whatever you want to call yourself, whether you are living it well or not. You actually find that out, because if after a certain period of time you go on retreat again and you find that your mindfulness has increased, your samadhi has increased, your defilements have gone down, you're less angry, right? You're more patient, all these kind of things. You have a more kind heart, you have more compassion for the people around you. If that is what you find when you go on retreat, and especially that your meditation is more profound, and that is one of the ways to gauge whether you really are living your life as a Buddhist in the right way. Otherwise, how do we know sometimes? Yes, we do all the right things, we do what seems to work or whatever, but you need some way of kind of establishing this. And going on a meditation retreat is a wonderful way of doing that. And hopefully, when you do that sometimes, you will get some of those great results, right? Which are part and parcel, can be part and parcel anyway, of meditation practice. When you really feel a sense of bliss, when you feel a sense of inner purity and happiness. And when you do that, you start to understand the value of living the spiritual life. You get access to certain things that ordinary people just don't have access to. And you start to get closer to understanding what the real meaning of life actually is. And the Buddha said, also lay people should also have access to that, right? It is not just for monastics. So if you live life well, you too can go there. And what a wonderful thing that is if that happens. So as you can see, that is just a summary of some of the teachings of the Buddha gave to lay people. It is pretty much the same as it is for monastics. All of the things that I've talked about tonight is basically the things that you can expect the Buddha to say almost to anyone. But still, the slant, the emphasis is slightly different. But that is really all there is to it. Otherwise, it is all there, and everything is there for you to enjoy, right? So practice in the right way, and you too can take part in these amazing and wonderful things that can happen on the Buddhist path. Okay, so that is the talk for tonight. Okay, so are there any questions from the assembly tonight? Yes, you want to ask a question? No? Yeah, just over here. Okay.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about how being compassionate to other people and being a lay Buddhist, then there's a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends who are not Buddhists or have exposure to Buddhist teachings.
Yeah.
But I think that they can get a lot of benefit from it. But it's very hard to come to people, like the same as how people feel uncomfortable when they got told about Christianity, God, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And there are people who are uncomfortable to, we tell like, this be good for you. So what's something we can do?
Don't tell them it's good for, tell them it's fun, right? When you come to Dhammaloka Center Friday night, it's a kind of Ajahn Brahmali is really good at this because it makes it very entertaining. He said, you want to hear some good jokes? Come to Dhammaloka Center on Friday night. Right? There's a bit of spirituality perhaps, but the main point you're going to come is just to have some good jokes and have a good time. And I think this is one of the I think most important things of a spiritual leader is to make the Dhamma accessible, right? Especially to people who haven't got that inclination, maybe don't really understand what it's all about. So you make it accessible to them. And then the kind of people, so it's about the packaging is very important. And then as you give the right packaging, the spiritual input is also there. According to Ajahn Brahm, there was a famous Tibetan monk many years ago who said something to the effect that the way to teach the Dhamma is that you make people laugh, right? And when their mouth is agape, you throw in the pillow wisdom. That was his idea of teaching people, right? And it's quite nice. I think there's something to that, You make sure people have a good time. Spiritual practice should not be a torture. It should actually be something to make you happy and feel good. That's the whole point of this. Sometimes people think that spiritual practice or religion is somehow kind of, is some kind of, restraint on you or something negative. You have to really be nice, and you have to be restrained. You have to keep all these precepts and all these things. But the reality, of course, is that if you lead the spiritual life in the right way, it is the exact opposite of that. It's about happiness and joy and about all the good things. Who doesn't want that? Everybody wants that, right? Sometimes people just don't know where to get it, and that's the problem. Okay, anyone else wants to say anything? Okay, very, very contented assembly tonight. Okay, good. So we'll stay with that contentment. That's great. Okay, thank you all. Okay, I'll just get my glasses out because otherwise I can't see anything at all, and I can see some blurry black and white stuff, but that doesn't quite cut it. So, okay, the first question is from Joris. Could you elaborate on solitude as a lay devotee? In the Ovada Patimokkha, it says to dwell in seclusion. Okay, I really enjoy solitude, but find it hard to integrate in modern Western society here. That's great. If you like enjoying solitude, that's wonderful. The vast majority of people don't enjoy that at all. So that's you are already way ahead of everyone else pretty much. So what a great thing that is that you like solitude. So the way to do that, of course, is to understand that you have to do your things in ordinary life. Life is complicated. Life has a lot of things, demands on you, responsibilities that you have to do. So you do those, and then you take the opportunity to go into solitude whenever you get the opportunity. That is really the way to do that. And what you will find is that the better you are at dealing with your ordinary life, the better you are at being kind and compassionate to the people around you, the more you will enjoy the solitude. It's a weird thing, right? But the people who have a hard time dealing with people around them, who don't really have that kindness and compassion perhaps to ordinary people, when they go into solitude, it doesn't really work because their mind is the wrong place. But when your mind already has been developed in the right way in ordinary life, that's when solitude becomes incredibly powerful. Because you take that sense of goodness that you have inside of you, you take it into the solitude, and that's when it gives good results. So take the opportunity and come and stay in a monastery. Go to a retreat center. Go to these kind of places where you have the opportunity to do these kind of things. And then maybe you can take a year off, right? Take a year off somewhere. And then maybe go and stay in a monastery somewhere, a nice monastery, which is like a forest monastery, and just enjoy as much solitude as possible. These things are possible. Or maybe you should ordain. I don't know if you can ordain. That's a nice way to get heaps of solitude. As a Buddhist monk, I can pretty much get as much solitude as I want. Pretty much. Well, except, when you have to travel and teach and that kind of stuff. But you can get a lot of solitude in the monastery here. In our monastery, we have like a roster. If you want to go on retreat, you just put your name on the roster. Go on retreat anytime you want. That is how our monastery works. So that's pretty cool, right, if you like solitude here. So ordaining is not a bad idea at all. I can recommend that, especially if you like solitude. Okay, so good luck, Joris. So the next one is Ang Wei Trung from Penang in Malaysia. How should a layperson find security during old age, especially when one is single? There is no offspring to look after you. Okay, so how do you find security in old age when you are single? And of course, the best way to find a security is always in just practicing in the right way, living life well. The real security is the psychological security that you have inside of yourself. That is what it really is about, right? So just keep on doing those Buddhist things that actually lead to that inner psychological security. And even if the external security isn't there 100%, it's a bit dicey, a bit uncertain, at least you have the inner wealth of the heart. And the inner wealth of the heart, that is far more important than the outer wealth. So live according to your means, live in the right way. I mean, I can't tell you exactly how to deal with kind of financial security and these kind of things. But if you live the right way spiritually, I think you have done the most important thing in your life. This is really the way to go. Of course, if you are inclined that way, it is possible to go forth as well as a monastic. If you are a staunch Buddhist and you've been practicing for a long time and you feel that monastic life is for you, then of course you can do that as well. It is always a possibility here. Otherwise, it is good to be reborn in a country where the social security is really strong, right? So if you do all the right things in this life, you hopefully get reborn in such a country in your next life. So that is one way of doing it. Okay, so third question is from Sofia Antunes. I probably don't pronounce that correctly, but from Portugal. When I do something to try to be kind and generous because I am a shy person, I feel awkward and I feel that people think I am being fake. Can you please advise? Okay, so one of the, I think, important things in life is not to worry too much about what other people think. If you do that, you're never going to get anywhere in your spiritual life. Yes, sometimes people may think you are a fool, even for coming to the Buddhist society and think, what are you going there for? That's kind of really nuts to go there. What's the point of that? You can have a good time, somewhere else. Let's go to a restaurant or something like that. But the point is that other people often don't know, they don't understand, they cannot see what is going inside of your mind, they don't really understand where true happiness is to be found. So don't worry too much about other people. Do what is right. If you feel shy about it, then try to find the right way of doing things so that it doesn't make you feel even more shy, right? Because you can get even more shy, it makes it even more difficult. But try to find kind of nice ways of being kind without kind of it disturbing your state of mind. And if other people feel that, again, you are being fake, again, if it happens only occasionally, don't worry too much about it. If it happens a lot, all the time, then there's always different ways of doing these things, different ways of being kind, and just try to find new ways. All you have to do here is really just to investigate what you're doing, investigate your situation. And as you investigate what you're doing, there's always ways and means around these things, these awkward things. But so try do that, and eventually you will find a way. Kindness, generally speaking, in my experience, always is rewarded in the end. It always has a powerful effect. Sometimes people say, oh, I just get used by other people if I'm too kind. But in my life, I have always found that if I'm kind, people respond so beautifully to that kindness. Right? It has such a powerful impact on people. Maybe occasionally people will take it the wrong way, but I just shrug my shoulders. I don't really care about that. It is their problem if they take it the wrong way. But the general result, I feel, is always very, very powerful. So don't give up. Keep on investigating. See how you can do it in a good way, and don't be too concerned about what other people do. And then you will have a long, happy life as a Buddhist. Okay. That is all. Eddie. Oh, Eddie, okay, yes. Eddie is always reliable for a question, so we get Eddie at the back there.
Ajahn Brahmali.
Yeah.
The Buddha also mentioned that his teaching is timeless. Timeless, yeah. I was just referring to the modern movement, I don't like this, I take this out. I don't like that, I take that out. Or it's not necessary, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The idea that the Buddha's teaching is timeless, and it's not necessary so much to kind of look at the teaching and pick certain aspects and throw away other aspects. But actually to assume that those things that the Buddha taught, it's a complete package, and all the aspects in there are important. And the way I usually recommend people to do, sometimes you might read something which looks a bit strange. Put it aside for now. Come back to it later on. Then it make much more sense again in the future. But don't kind of think it's too easy to kind of chuck out a few things the Buddhists. I don't like the idea of non-self, so I just throw that out. If you do that, you may end up going really far astray as far as Buddhism is concerned. Thank you, Eddie. Okay, so let us pay respect to Buddha and Sangha.
Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami